this next question that I'd really like to ask. And it's something that we talk about a lot in, I think, across the advanced therapy space. And it's really how you keep the future in mind from the very beginning of your R&D, right? And you're thinking about manufacturability from the beginning. We've already talked about what we need to think about in that case, but from an R&D standpoint, I've written the argument that, you know, our R&D teams are not aliens, right? They are human beings like us. Our CMC teams and R&D teams belong together in a lot of ways, right? They need to be working very closely together to make sure that manufacturability is top of mind. And so, Harriet, and then maybe we can go to John as well on this. I'm curious how you encourage that, you know, in your organization, how you encourage the relationship between CMC and R&D. Are there steps that companies need to be taking to bring these teams closer together and get each other speaking each other's languages, right? To make sure that your mission is recognized, both of your missions.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, in the case of any large molecule therapeutic, the process ends up determining the product. Now, that's not entirely true. We're trying to get away from that by fully chemically characterizing the molecule, particularly in the case of mRNA. But what that means is that it's really important to have a very close connection between the manufacturing of the molecule and the discovery process of the molecule. And the two are very much intertwined. How you manufacture the molecule in discovery determines the outcome of the discovery, which leads to, you know, whether a candidate is nominated or not. And so the two are very closely related. And so the people that are supplying the reagents, if you will, for discovery are ultimately the ones that are also responsible for manufacturing of this entity for later stage GLP and GMP production. And so there is already, you know, a very close connection as a result. Doing it any other way, I cannot imagine it being a very successful operation, because if you have a different source of materials for discovery, and then you're trying to manufacture it separately from a different source for GLP or GMP purposes, that can lead to challenges. So it's important to have that seamless transition from discovery to GMP.
Absolutely. Yeah. Trying to make sure that your materials are of the same quality, right? Or that so you don't have to start over when you go to process development. That's a huge piece of that. John, what are your additional thoughts on this? How do you at Nutcracker encourage the sort of seamless communication between R&D and CMC?
Yeah, I think as Harry had said, and building on his points, right, you can tell that we've grown up in similar circles, right? We've always have been preached to in large molecules that the process is the product. That was the Bible we used to carry around in the day. So I think it's making sure that that is acknowledged. And I think there's, you know, Harry and I probably can share similar, I'll call it war stories, right? where when we both probably know what it looks like when you don't integrate. You know, that continuum that's very necessary. So, so I think there's a few things that we do here, and I think this is very important across several companies, right? So at Nutcracker, what we do is we have this complete platform because it really drives innovation. You have to think about things from an end-to-end perspective. And that drives a high level of internal collaboration. Right? You need to always start with the end in mind as you're designing your products for the various different reasons that Harry indicated, right? One thing is we do is, like I said before, with the lead candidate nomination process, it's a hardwired process in a sense, right? So putting good process and structure in place that when you're designing your mRNA, that you're looking at it from all potential considerations. You know, I've been in situations where I've, you know, successfully launched programs, and, you know, the manufacturability aspects of that had made it very difficult to sustain supply. And then you can make a career out of that, right? And and then you recognize that everybody needs to come together and help problem solve and really drive progress. But for us, again, we pre-invest in our initial data generation. We look at a variety of different panel of candidates that come through, and we look at not just the mRNA, but of course we look at the delivery vehicle chemistry as well. That's an important element, right? So it's not just the mRNA, but the delivery vehicle, where we consider expression, we look at inherent product stability, and we look at manufacturability. So all those things are particularly important. And then I think it comes down, frankly, to the setting expectations for the organization from a leadership perspective, right? How do you work in cross-functional teams? How do you ensure that the research and development organization, along with the process development organization, is staying together in an integrated way and really transitioning through that process to key points of success in the development paradigm. So, and for us, it's establishing those criteria, achieving those outcomes, right, and then having the team celebrate, and as we bring candidates forward.
Yeah, you bring up some really good points. I really like that reminder of thinking about the delivery as well, right? We can't be avoiding thinking about how we're getting our cargo to where it needs to go, right? That was a topic of discussion on one of these Bioprocess Online live webinars a few months ago, right, that I'd hosted. And that's a big issue in the space today, the delivery vehicles. I also love this notion, right, of continuing to emphasize the importance and discuss openly with your leadership the challenges that you face as well, right, on the manufacturing floor, and keeping that top of mind, because you can't necessarily you can't avoid that, and the costs as well associated with manufacturing, I've heard, are better spent early rather than later, right? So that's a huge consideration.
And even if you think about the regulatory environment as well, and the stages as you're progressing through your clinical programs, right? My lesson in life always is, drive a level of process understanding and change early in that paradigm, right? As you get later into particularly the regulatory space and the delivery space, right? There's always mounting pressures, right, to ensure you have sustained supply, good characterization data of your process. But the more that you can pre-invest in the early space, and the more flexibility you have in making changes, right, without maybe the burden of the challenges of comparability assessments, et cetera. So so I think there's the advantages, and always lead with the good science would be my recommendation.